Hello, and welcome to episode 6 of Tinker Talk, the weekly podcast where we discuss football because we all have opinions. I'm Josh Andrews, and I'm joined by the Sam Aladici to my big Sam, Matthew David.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Hello.
Hey, how you doing?
I'm okay, you?
Yeah, no complaints.
Good.
This week, we discuss the greatest comebacks in football history. And if that's not enough for you, we look at some of the most overrated players in football today and discuss some of the worst refereeing performances we can remember. Now, just a quick disclaimer. Referees do a ridiculously difficult job and don't get the recognition they deserve when they get it right. But that being said, Matthew, how bad was the ref during Bayern versus Arsenal?
I'm glad you put in the little disclaimer, but yes, he was appalling. Completely, just awful. I'm trying to remember if he got a decision right.
Well, for the sake of less pauses during this, let's look at the decisions that he got wrong.
Right, this could take a while. So the major ones, obviously, being the penalty that was fairly blatant on Theo Walcott.
Yep.
The red card, which wasn't a red card, and then it was a red card, even though it shouldn't have been a red card.
If people haven't watched the game, that is going to be very difficult for people to get their head round.
I'll explain it in a moment.
Sure.
Vidal's rugby audition.
Yeah?
Rugby? Wrestling.
Rugby, wrestling, same thing.
Both work, yep. Same thing. Interesting statement.
Yes.
As well as I think Walcott's yellow card was probably the other kind of standout one.
Yeah.
Which one to begin with?
Just as another thing as well, I thought Chamberlain's yellow card was a bit unfair, but that might have just been for dissent.
Yeah, I think the cameras for the kind of the TV didn't really make that particularly clear whether or not it was even a foul in the first place or if Rafinha dived. But if it was for the way he acted afterwards, then I think it probably was a yellow.
Fair enough.
Yeah. I guess we'll start with the penalty.
Yeah.
What were your thoughts on that?
It was a penalty. Enough said.
Yep, that about covers that. Expert analysis with your hosts. I'm not even going to go there.
Tinker Talk. Yeah.
Yes, that would. Yeah, so I believe, was it Alonso? Was late into the tackle and got a little contact on the ball, but I think the penalty was because Walcott could have kept it in if Alonso didn't take him down.
Sure.
And I think that was stonewall and clear as it comes, and for whatever reason it wasn't given by the official behind the goal, who later in the match was responsible for Koscielny's red card, which, if you want to talk about.
So Lewandowski got through the Arsenal defence, but Koscielny basically tackled him from behind, and it definitely was a penalty. Like, clear cut, no question. And the referee gave a yellow card, and then about half a minute later decided to brandish a red card for no reason that was immediately apparent. And it just made no sense. I don't know how to justify it. It made no sense.
Yeah, even in the commentary on the match, there was kind of confusion. It took them a long time to even work out why he'd been sent off. And I mean, Wenger was complaining after the match saying that Lewandowski was offside as well. I'm not sure about that.
I think replays did show that he was, but I mean, regardless, it doesn't really,
Well, no, it just adds to the whole situation, really. But
sure.
I think Koscielny, even by the new rules and the way the rules work now, I'm pretty sure unless because it was a penalty, it should have been a yellow card because it wasn't a dangerous tackle.
Sure. And
for whatever reason, the referees listened to his official behind the goal, who for some reason has decided it's a red card, not a yellow card. Mm-hmm. And it just didn't make any sense. And it looked like Bayern had kind of bullied him into a decision. Obviously, I'm not sure about that or what exactly happened or why he changed his mind.
You can look at whether Bayern, perhaps bullied them into a decision. At the end of the day, the referee has to own that decision as his own. And
definitely.
It was just a poor one.
Yeah, and I mean, it was his Champions League debut as well, which I don't think he'll, based on that performance, I don't know how many more Champions League matches he'll be put in charge of. I mean, he might be a good ref every other time. I don't know, but that particular match was horrific.
Well, that's interesting, because the commentators during the match pointed out that you wouldn't have thought this would have been an incredibly difficult game to officiate, based on the fact that Bayern were already 5-1 up, and it probably wasn't one of the bigger games in terms of importance that the referees would have felt the need to absolutely get right. Obviously, referees try and get it right all the time, but in terms of importance, you'd have probably put more emphasis on the Real Madrid-Napoli game, because that, realistically could have gone either way.
You say that, and we'll come to this a bit more momentarily.
Sure.
The Champions League has proven that even if a team is 4 goals up, the match is still not over. So every match is really as important as the other one, and I think that if that's a kind of mentality towards it, that we can try them out because the game's over, I don't think that's a very kind of... I think that's more of a group stage thing to do.
I think that's fair. Yeah, no argument at all.
Do you want to talk about the game a little bit?
Sure. I mean, in the first half, Arsenal were the better team, for the most part, and it was only really until the beginning of the second half where Koscielny got sent off where things started looking good for Bayern. Once Koscielny went off, Xhaka was put into centre half, and Arsenal sort of crumbled ever so slightly, and once it became 3-1, it was just a matter of how many more Bayern were going to score.
Yeah, we talked a couple of weeks ago after the first leg about how Bayern didn't really have to step out of first gear, and it was the same again. I think Arsenal, after the red card, again, just despite the controversy around it, the red card happened and Arsenal just didn't deal with it and were torn to shreds after that. And 10-2 aggregate defeat is not pretty.
It's not. It's the kind of thing that will probably be remembered in the history books by everyone who wants to take the mick out of Arsenal fans in the future.
Without a doubt. Now, we were talking about the referee a moment ago.
Yep.
And we were talking before this, and we came up with a few poor refereeing performances, and I have some decisions as well that were fairly controversial in the past. So, kind of, what ones come to your mind?
Well, going, sticking to the sort of Champions League narrative, I guess. The referee during the Chelsea-Barcelona match in, I believe, 2009 is the first one that came into my mind. Some say 4 blatant penalties, but unquestionably 4 penalty shouts, none of which were given. For Chelsea, I thought it was one of the worst refereeing matches I've ever seen. What about you?
Yeah, we've had a few discussions about this in the past. Tend to have slightly different opinions on some aspects of it.
Sure.
The referee in that game was very poor. However, you'll sometimes have games where one penalty decision will be wrong when it's a blatant penalty. I think in that game, I think if I remember right, it was either 1 was a definite penalty and the rest were questionable, or it was 2 were definite penalties and the other 2 weren't.
I believe when we've discussed this in the past, it was 2 definite, 1 questionable, and 1 that probably wasn't.
Okay. So, yeah, because there was 1 foul that started outside the box and should have been a free kick.
Mm-hmm.
I think 1 with Drogba, I think, went down really easily, and I didn't think it was a foul. Anyway, that's not important. The refereeing performance in that game was very bad. I just think it's maybe overstated a little bit because of how much the game meant.
Sure. And in fairness, in reality, the 1 penalty would have made the difference in that match. So when you look at 4 that are potentially not given, it's always going to be sort of exaggerated and amplified as to how bad the referee may or may not have been. But
sure.
I do think when you consider the magnitude of the game and the decisions themselves that weren't made, I would suggest this is probably one of the worst refereeing performances I've ever seen.
I mean, I'd probably have to agree based on the fact that when I was thinking of bad refereeing performances, that was one of the first ones that came to my mind.
Yep.
And obviously, I think Chelsea fans and Drogba think it's a disgrace.
Just knew you
Great.
were going to say that at some point.
I had to. I couldn't resist.
Yeah, fair play.
But yeah, so I think that was quite a bad performance. It's just I think it exaggerated a bit how bad it was. Another one that I have was actually a very recent one. So recent it was at the weekend, which was Kevin Friend in the Man United Bournemouth game.
Right?
Ibrahimovic and Mings were having fisticuffs for the majority of the match. Kind of having a sort of seeing who could impose themselves the best, I suppose. And there was a very kind of unsavoury incident where Ibrahimovic had a little kick out at Mings, then got taken out by Rooney. And then, as Mings was trying to jump over him, and Mings has since got a 5-match ban for this,
Right.
when he was trying to jump over him, he stomped on Ibrahimovic's head.
Oh dear.
Now, that one was very difficult to tell whether it was deliberate or not, because he was looking at the ball when he jumped.
Mm-hmm.
But it did look like he could have avoided it. Ibrahimovic then retaliated in the box by elbowing him swiftly to the face, which was blatant and should have been a red card. And he's since been handed a 3-game suspension.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the referee, being Kevin Friend, let the game escalate to that point, and the decisions just weren't right in regards to those particular incidents. And obviously, because they're fresh and they've just happened, that made my list.
Sure. Then if we're going to talk about referees who weren't able to maintain control of the match, I have 2 international games that we can talk about. The first of which being Spain versus Holland, the 2010 World Cup final.
The De Jong final.
Yes. The final where De Jong probably could have been sent off 3 times in accumulative yellow cards.
Yeah. Yep. That's not it's not an unfair conclusion.
Yeah, Holland basically set out that game to just murder Spain's team as best they could.
I don't think they wanted to murder them. I think they wanted to disrupt them. Whether or not that involved kicking the ball or their stomachs is another matter.
Sure.
But yeah, that was a shocking bit of officiating.
Yeah. I think when you're having to brandish that many cards and also not brandishing as many as there probably should have been, it's a bit difficult to say that was a good refereeing performance.
Was that Howard Webb?
Yes, it was.
Yeah. Eek.
But the other international game that I wanted to speak about as well was the, quote, infamous Battle of Nuremberg. It was a match between Holland and Portugal in the 2006 World Cup.
Was this the one that had a ton of yellows?
16 yellow cards, 4 red cards. I mean,
a fair amount.
For the way that the game went, yeah. Although you could argue that some of the yellow cards should have been reds themselves. But again, when the referee isn't able to take control of the game, there's no question it's not a very good performance.
Yeah. I mean, do you think that if a referee, we'll have a little conversation about this. Do you think if a referee can't manage it in a way that players don't want to do that, do you think that's necessarily the referee's fault?
I think if the players are obviously setting out to be aggressive and borderline violent as they were in that particular game, for example, then the referee has to make it clear from the get-go that he's not going to put up with it. And I can't imagine any team, no matter how assertive and aggressive that they want to play, are ever going to knowingly set their players to potentially get sent off really early on.
Yeah, that doesn't sound like the best tactical game plan.
No.
Do you have any other whole matches to look at?
this one's relatively fresh, but the Arsenal-Chelsea match where
Is this the Andre Mariner one? The Gibbs and Chamberlain incident?
Oh, I hadn't even thought about that one. It wasn't that one I was actually going to say, but we could talk about that as well.
That was on my list. We'll get onto that in a moment. What one were you thinking of?
The one where Mike Dean decided to make the game all about himself and send Gabriel off for the tiniest little flick art when Diego Costa probably should have been sent off twice beforehand as well.
Yeah. I think we'll just for avoiding confrontation purposes, we are not claiming that Mike Dean was acting in a non professional manner on that particular game. We're just saying that he was very stupid. Ding. Yeah, that was the one when Costa was doing his best Joey Barton impression.
Yes.
Yes,
Thug
he was
like.
a thug. Yes. Gotta have that Joey Barton reference.
Yeah.
Yeah. The Andre Mariner one.
Yeah.
Oh dear.
Wow. I'm shocked that when I was coming up with these that I didn't actually remember this.
Me too.
Was it Kieran Gibbs and Chamberlain that he got confused between the two of?
Yeah, so Chamberlain handballed it. Very good save.
Yeah.
And he sent off Gibbs for it.
Mm-hmm.
And Chamberlain even told him, it was me, it wasn't Gibbs, it wasn't Gibbs, it was me. And he was having none of it, he just sent off Gibbs. I think the scoreline for the sake of some people's hearts, I might leave out just because of the result this week. It's probably a bit of a sore spot. But yeah, that was one of the incidents that I had. Another kind of very sort of controversial one and a fairly big one of the worst chains of decisions in footballing history as far as I can recall.
Right.
Graham Poll in the Croatia versus Australia match booked Simjanic 3 times.
Yep. Yeah, there was no way we were going to have this discussion without bringing that up.
No. Now that's quite impressive. Now, I don't know about you, but I think if I was playing and I had got 2 yellow cards and I hadn't been sent off, I'd probably avoid making any tackles for the rest of the game.
Sure.
I'd also maybe suggest to my manager that it might be worth bringing me off. I wouldn't then go and get booked for a 3rd time and get sent off for it.
Yeah.
I don't think that's particularly sensible.
What?
But no, that was a howler of a game for him.
I do quickly just want to question the opposing team who didn't feel the need to point out that this player had been booked twice.
Maybe he just didn't understand their accent.
Ah. Wow. Fine. Okay.
Another international one, and this one England fans will be quick to bring up against Germany. When Lampard shot crossed the line by quite a distance, and the goal was not given.
Yeah.
That's on my list. I've also got, I believe it was Spurs against Man United when Tom Carroll well done Matthew. Roy Carroll. That's perfect. That just, yeah. Roy Carroll. Not the Swansea midfielder. No, Roy Carroll clawed the ball out from quite a significant distance behind his line and acted as if nothing had happened.
Yep.
That was a really poor decision. As well as my decision to mention Carroll.
You asked me specifically before this not to mention Michael Owen, and I have to now.
That's just so harsh. Look. This is my first time back after my retirement.
Sure.
You can let me off a couple.
It's fine.
Another one I had was in Germany last season when a ball hit the crossbar and bounced a good 3 yards away from the line and was given as a goal.
Right.
And then my last one, I don't know if you remember this, in the Watford versus Reading game, a ghost goal was given by Stuart Atwell.
Right.
The ball didn't even look like it had gone in at any point. And it just caused mass confusion, and he just gave a goal from nowhere, really.
Sure.
And they were all the ones I could think of immediately. I'm sure there's plenty more. But...
Yep. I have one more.
Mm-hmm.
The Tottenham-Chelsea game nearing the end of last season was ridiculous in terms of the amount of just red card opportunities the ref would have had to give them out.
Yeah, I believe that one's been christened the Battle of the Bridge. I think Eric Dyer probably could have walked away with about 7 red cards for himself.
Yeah.
I think he got a bit carried away with his kind of aggression. Maybe couldn't quite handle what was happening on the pitch. And he's kind of the standout one. He got a bit bonkers. I think Dembele had a couple, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, Dembele's fingers made contact with Diego Costa's eye.
Yeah. To be honest, I think in that match there was the possibility for almost every player for Tottenham, except Harry Kane, to get sent off. I think he was the only one who behaved himself, and he just couldn't believe what was happening, really.
Yeah. Probably just happy to be there.
Yeah, just enjoying his day out.
One other minor incident, obviously, during that game being the squaring off of Danny Rose and Willian in the touchline.
Yeah, and Pochettino got involved.
Yeah. That was nice.
Yeah, that was quite a heated game.
Yeah.
Although I think that game would have been difficult for anyone to officiate.
Yeah. I don't know if you'd necessarily call that the worst refereeing performance, but it's definitely... I mean, the lack of red cards, I think, probably would suggest that it was quite poor.
I think he might have let it get out of control. Just a tad. That's probably a good place to wrap up our discussion on referees.
Yeah. Again, just before we wrap that up, though, yes, we appreciate the job that referees do, and hopefully there'll be more good performances from referees to come in the future.
Definitely. I think everyone would benefit from that.
Yeah.
Just a little love heart for a referee. Yeah. Right.
Bloody love hearts.
Look, I'm a nice person.
Sure.
Are we going to move on to some overrated players?
Yeah, let's do that.
Now, where did this come from?
Sanchez.
Yes. So, I mean, not to be too critical, but I'm going to be critical.
Sure.
Probably too critical, to be honest. For a while, Sanchez, obviously at Arsenal, has been praised as this hard-working, works his socks off, runs himself into the ground type of player. And for going on 2 seasons?
Yeah.
I've kind of not thought that was an accurate conclusion, and I think, was it today?
Yeah.
Yeah, today I saw the first article published on that anywhere, which showed that his sprint stats are, well, to be honest, they're awful. Mesut Ozil gets a lot of criticism for not working hard, but in 14 of the 16 games he's completed this season, he has sprinted over 10 kilometres, and
Right.
Sanchez has not managed that in a single game.
Yep.
Not that Sanchez isn't a good player, but yeah, definitely one who I think people seem to think he's this world-class player, and he seems to think he's this world-class player. He's compared himself to Ronaldo and Messi and said that he can be as good as them.
Yeah. I mean, in fairness, going back to other things that make Sanchez not so great, not that we want to, tear into him like that, but Messi and Ronaldo at least have positional awareness.
Pew pew.
He doesn't know how to not go towards the ball when the ball isn't near his own position.
Yeah, that's true. But I think Sanchez is one that we probably both think is overrated.
Yeah.
Should we go on to some more players?
Yeah, let Sanchez is not the only one.
No, there's quite a few.
Mm-hmm.
So, one of my players that I have is Wayne Rooney.
Shocking.
I know, I can't believe it either. Where to start with Rooney? Obviously, he's been a very good player in the Premier League. That's why he's Man United's top scorer and England's top scorer.
Mm-hmm.
But he doesn't even have a position now.
No.
And I think people talk of him as being England's best player, which I don't think he is personally. I think personally, I think Lallana, Sterling, Kane, Ali. I'm definitely missing some, but I think they're better than Rooney now.
Sure. Henderson.
Yeah, that one will be popular. We'll have to do an underrated player segment at some point.
Sure.
Yeah, I could probably think of some more for that one.
Mm-hmm.
Do you agree on Rooney?
Yeah, but I think it's strange. Rooney's a really overrated player, but I think everyone thinks he's overrated as well. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's kind of true.
I think people have sort of wizened up on Rooney in the sense where his performances for England, especially, have sort of shown where Rooney's biggest weaknesses are. And especially in the last couple of seasons where nobody's really been able to figure out if he's a number 10, if he's a defensive midfielder, or if he's a striker.
Or
I think
sub.
As a sub, yeah, sure, just have him on the bench. It's difficult to say that he's still a really, really, really good player when I don't know where I'd have him in my team. I mean, a sub or not there at all, I guess.
Yeah, it's a tricky one because obviously he, when he was younger, he had all the talent in the world. But I think it's as he's kind of got older, I think he's not got the pace he used to have. And his shooting isn't as consistent anymore, and he's been kind of replaced in that United lineup by Ibra, for example.
Yeah.
So I think it's a bit difficult for Rooney. That said, he is a very kind of good professional. I think he's just ability-wise, he's probably overrated.
I think that's very fair.
Who's next on your list?
I had Ribery.
I also had Ribery.
I think there was a year there was a year in 2013. That was a year, correct?
Good job.
Where
cutting edge reporting, Josh. Thanks, Chris. That was Kamala. That was a Kamala joke.
That's a lot nicer than Michael Owen.
That was a Michael Owen statement.
Yeah. All right. Sweet. Right.
Moving on. Sorry.
So I believe it was in 2013 where Ribery was one of the 3 main nominees for the Ballon d'Or.
Yeah.
How?
You know what? I really thought. I don't know why I thought this. I really thought you were going to have like a sincere point as to why he shouldn't have been there and all that, and you're just like, I just don't get it.
I don't want to sound like I'm just ripping into players. Ribery, again, is a very, very good player, but he wasn't even the best winger in Bayern's team that season.
No, that was definitely Robin.
Yeah.
Was that the year they won the Champions League?
Yeah, I think so.
Yes. I mean, he scored a long shot at some point.
Well, he probably scored many long shots, but long shots don't equate to being the 3rd best player in the world, according to some awards ceremony.
Yeah, I think Ribery has been he's one of those players who I think I've always kind of thought was very good. I've never really liked him particularly, but I don't think I've ever thought of him as like a world-class player either. So yeah, the fact that he was kind of rated the third best in the world is a bit bizarre to me. So yeah, I'd agree with Ribery on that one. Although he is still doing a pretty decent job at Bayern now, and he's, I don't know how old now, but it feels like he's been around forever.
Pretty old.
Yeah. The next one on my list, I think we're going to have quite an interesting discussion about.
Right.
Paul Pogba.
See, well, I mean, make your point about Pogba before I do. It's on your list, so.
I think, and we spend a lot of time on this podcast kind of looking at transfer fees and stuff like that. They don't really count for much.
Sure.
But I think the fact that he's the world's most expensive player has kind of inflated what people think of him. And I just, for people, and I've heard people say this, that he's the best centre mid in the world, I don't think he's even close. And right. I just think that way too many people think much more of him than I think is probably fair based on what he's achieved and his performances over his time at Juventus and now at United.
Right, so this is where I get to retort. Here's the thing with Pogba, and I don't know whom you've heard call him the best midfielder in the world. I don't necessarily think he's overrated, but I do think his potential's overrated. Because I do think most people think he's going to be the best midfielder in the world, and I don't quite understand that from a perspective of somebody who's watched him for Man United this season. That being said, though, I do think people realise that the transfer fee, I think the transfer fee has exposed Pogba for the player that he is, and again, he's still a very good player, but he's clearly not an £80+ million player.
No.
And I think most people can see that. And fans have a tendency to be incredibly cynical and critical of players whenever they are underperforming. And I think for an £80+ million player, Pogba has been underperforming, so I don't really see how he can be considered somebody who's overrated.
Because I think people still think that he's one of the best. Like, people now are kind of thinking he's one of the best players in the Premier League, and there have been a lot of kind of pundits and things who've said kind of stuff to that effect. And I don't know. I just don't think he. Again, I agree with you saying about his potential being overrated. I completely agree.
Yep.
But when he was at Juventus, for example, I think if you look at their midfield, I think maybe he might have been the third best centre mid they had,
behind Marquisio and Pirlo.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, he obviously improved during his time there. So when he got there, he's obviously worse than a couple of the others.
Sure.
But I think that people are talking about him as this kind of superstar player. I just don't think he is. That's kind of my opinion. I do think he's a good player.
Well, yeah.
I just don't think he's a top player, as some people seem to think he is, and that's why I think he's overrated.
Well, I mean, I sort of made a joke about Ribery not being the best winger at Man United. I do think
winger at Man United.
Sorry, the best winger at Bayern Munich. But I mean, we've had this discussion before. Herrera, I think we both agree, is the best midfielder at Man United at the moment.
I think so. He's criminally underrated.
But I do think that he's not far off. Pogba is not far off. It's just, if Pogba cuts some of the unnecessary things out of his game, I think he can be closer to the, really good player that some of the pundits seem to think he is. I don't think he's ever going to be one of the best in the world, but I do think that he's better than you personally give him credit for.
I mean, I agreed up until that last bit.
Well, that's what happens when I disagree with you. You're not going to agree with my disagreement of you. That's a really difficult thing to wrap somebody's head around. Who's next on your list?
Next on... Perfect. Next on my list is Petr Cech.
Right.
I do not like Petr Cech. At all.
Please
A
explain.
bit. I mean, to give you a bit of a kind of example, for those of you that have seen Walcott's goal against Bayern Munich when Neuer kind of flapped at it and it went in off his hands, my immediate reaction to that was, oh look, Neuer's doing his best Czech impression.
Right.
He can't catch, and in the air he looks scared every time he goes for it. And Arsenal's defence just don't look particularly confident with him in front of them. He used to be a fantastic goalkeeper when he was at Chelsea, and then he started going kind of downhill. And I think he's carried on going downhill, and now I don't think he's any better than a pretty good keeper. So I'd be interested to hear what you think.
Czech's an irritating one. Because I see where you're coming from, and I do agree that he's very, very overrated. The problem is that he is only overrated now. I don't think he, over the course of his career, is ever really going to be considered an overrated player. I know that's not necessarily the point.
Of course not.
But you look at somebody like Czech, and he's been overrated for maybe 2 years?
I mean, I think...
At the latter stage of his career?
When Arsenal signed him, the consensus was that he was going to save Arsenal X number of points per season, and so on and so on. And he's not made a difference to them at all, and probably lost some points here and there. And he has been a fantastic goalkeeper. People look back on his career and think, you know what, he was great. I just think that now, as his ability is at the moment, people are still comparing him and thinking of him as he was, when in reality he's nowhere near that level now.
I'll say this. Czech is very, very good at making the shots that he saves look much better than they are. And that, I think, is the primary reason why he is slightly overrated, if not very overrated.
That's perfectly fair. Now, I have one more player on my list. I don't know. Do you have any more on yours?
None that match the caliber of people we're talking about, so.
Okay. The last one on my list is Benzema.
Right.
Now, there seems to be a kind of thought that Benzema is a top striker. I think he's a pretty good striker.
Right.
But when you look at Real Madrid's team, in particular, an example of a player they let go would be Higuain. Higuain is a phenomenal finisher, and if not... No, I'd probably say world-class striker.
Yeah.
I don't think Benzema is. But I think people think of him as being one.
Do you think that is down to the quality of teammates that he has?
Yes. I think when you play with Ronaldo, Bale, Rodriguez, Isco, Kroos, Modric, you're going to get a lot more chances, and if you score some of them, obviously people look at goal tallies. And having said that, I'm not actually sure how many Benzema's on this season, but people look at goal tallies and make their assumptions based off of that. And I think Benzema's, at least in kind of recent memory, have kind of flattered to deceive in terms of his kind of quality of performance. Not that, again, with most of these, it's not that I don't think they're good players. I just think that they're not as good as the general consensus seems to be that they are.
Yeah. I mean, this is the thing, is that we look at overrated players. You can't ever look at a player who's playing, top-level professional football and say that they're not good players. They obviously are, but they aren't as good as either they think they are, the fans think they are, or their managers think they are. That's the best way I think one can describe an overrated player. And with that, I think if Benzema is the person that Real Madrid are keeping at Real Madrid, and Higuain's the person that they're letting go, I think that emphasizes your point best as to why Benzema may be, and in my opinion is also, an overrated player.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good summary.
Mm-hmm. I actually do have one more that's literally popped into my head now.
I'm filled with intrigue.
So with games like FIFA being sort of a primary reason as to how a lot of fans look at players and think, oh yeah, that player's, going to be great. Especially when, players get linked with other teams and stuff.
Right.
I think Akinfenwa
Oh god.
has kind of become a bit of a cult hero amongst the younger generation, and I think they have a tendency to think, "Ooh, yeah, he's really, 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 really good." And again, he's definitely a better football player than you or me. But
yeah, I don't think that's an unfair statement.
Well, yeah. He's definitely a good football player. But I think there are just so many other players, strikers in, League 2, seeing as that's where he's played for the majority of his career. There's so many strikers in League 2 who deserve far more recognition than somebody who's merely just got the highest strength in a football game.
Yeah, I would have made that same shots fired joke from earlier about you mentioning about his career being in League 2, but I don't think any shots would penetrate him.
Yeah, they just bounce off his massive thighs.
Are we turning him into Chuck Norris? Is that really what we're doing here?
We're overrating him now, Jesus.
Right. I don't think he's overrated because I don't think many people seriously rate him. I think he's a meme, for lack of a better term.
I mean,
yeah.
Regardless, I think the fact that he's as well known as he is, and this obviously, he's done his bit to become as well known as he is outside of the whole FIFA world and everything. But I think if you ask any teenager who has FIFA to name a striker in League 2, the first one they'll think of is Akinfenwa. Not the top scorer. Not the best from their local club. Akinfenwa will probably be the first one that they come out with. And I think, in and of itself, that's, if not overrated, then overhyped.
I get where you're coming from.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I don't think I could call him overrated.
Yeah. Well, either way, Akinfenwa, if we ever come into personal contact, please don't kill me.
Big fan.
big fan.
Well, I mean, talking about big things, that is a really weird segue.
What?
I was going to talk about big comebacks.
Oh, okay.
It was just the worst segue I've ever done in my entire life.
Terrible.
But it made us laugh.
Yep, absolutely.
So, Why are we talking about big comebacks?
Because Barcelona are mad.
Little bit crazy.
And just to quickly finish off the run, and PSG are bad.
So, do you remember how we were talking about PSG playing phenomenally against Barca and pretty much securing their place into the quarterfinals?
I do. You can
We
catch
were
that
wrong.
on a couple of weeks ago.
We were so wrong. Although, if you didn't catch that episode, don't go back, and I lied a minute ago. We were totally right. We knew this was going to happen.
Yeah,
Yes.
completely.
Yes. Prediction masterminds.
Mm-hmm.
Barcelona thumped them.
Yep.
Yeah, Barcelona started great, and it was 2-0 at half-time, and then went into the second half, 3-0. Fine. Then Cavani got a goal back,
Yeah.
and you're thinking, well, that's that done.
Yeah. And in fairness, at that point, PSG were actually playing quite well.
They were. They probably should have added a couple more goals,
Sure.
to be fair. But, no, as the game progressed, it got to the 88th minute, and Neymar's free kick was... Mwah.
Phenomenal.
That was me doing that, when something's tasty.
Yeah.
Mwah.
Bellissimo.
Yes.
I said an Italian word during a French versus Spanish team.
Yeah, talking about a Brazilian person's free kick.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway. The 88th minute to make it 4-1, and Barcelona just kind of went on a bit of a mad one from there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. How did they do that?
Well,
They were good, basically.
I don't know. Like, PSG were shockingly bad, especially when you consider that they, thumped Barcelona 4-0 in the first leg.
Yeah.
And I've got to assume that there must have been some sort of complacency amongst the PSG ranks. And whilst Barcelona didn't look, phenomenal at first, they always looked like they were going to win. At no point did they ever look, we're going to accept, this result. They always looked like they were going to try and go for more.
I think they bullied PSG. I think the pressure that they put on them, I praised PSG for their pressing in the first leg. Barca completely outdid that in this game. PSG didn't get a sniff. For the whole of the first half, they didn't seem to get out of their own final third.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Luis Enrique deserves a lot of credit for kind of the performance his team have put in, and obviously the players do as well.
Yeah.
But that match in particular, which is phenomenal, got us thinking about some other great comebacks.
It did indeed.
My segues are just getting better and better.
Yeah, I mean, it was better than the last one for sure.
I think anything would have been. So,
Sure.
Thinking about them, and we'll probably keep it a bit, just a little summary of each of them. I think we'll leave kind of the major Champions League one. I think we'll leave that till last, but I think most people know what that is anyway.
Yeah.
So, one that I have
Mm-hmm.
was in the Premier League, and it was a game between Newcastle and Arsenal.
Right. That was 2011, I think.
I don't know when it was, but
I believe it was.
if you say so. Cool.
Yes.
Arsenal were 4-0 up,
Mm-hmm.
and then they weren't anymore.
Oh. Do you want to expand on that?
Newcastle were like, hey, we're losing 4-0. Let's not do that. And came back from 4 goals down, which I believe still to this day is the biggest comeback in a Premier League match.
Yeah, I believe you might be right on that front.
Yeah. And drew 4-4. And I think Tiote scored a wonder goal in that game as well.
He did. It was a belter.
Yeah.
And you know how much I like long shots.
Oh, I know they're your favourite. What game you got?
Well, this is a fun game, but the Spurs versus Man City match in 2004 is probably the game where Spurs got their whole bottle job nickname. I don't know if it's a nickname, but it this sort of idea of this is how their club kind of is. They were 3-0 up at halftime.
Okay.
And City were down to 10 men.
So you'd expect Tottenham to see the game out?
You'd expect them to see the game out, possibly get a couple more goals here and there. Kevin Keegan, who the City manager was at the time, supposedly said that they were 3-0 down and a man down. Where's the nearest job centre? At half-time.
It's an inspiring team talk if I've ever heard one.
And 45 minutes later, they were winning and had won 4-3.
You would feel gutted.
If you were a Spurs fan.
Yeah, I suppose so. I suppose
Yeah.
maybe if you anything that happened to you, that would sting a bit.
Yeah.
My next one, and it seems to be a recurring pattern, is a comeback this time by Arsenal
Right.
when they came back from quite a hefty deficit to beat Reading 7-5 after extra time in... Was it the League Cup?
It was the League Cup. It was
the
the
League
League
Cup.
Cup. Yeah.
That was quite a crazy match as well.
Yeah?
Noticing that there seems to be a lot of goals in these.
Well, great comebacks tend to, that is what they are. You get a deficit, a great one, and then it's overcome.
Yeah, I suppose it wouldn't be a great comeback if it was now it's 1-1.
Yeah, it's just not as impressive.
No. But yeah, so that was a goal fest. You got another one?
The Germany-Sweden game in 2012 was rather mad.
I think I remember this one.
Yeah. The Germans were up 4-0 with about 20... somewhere between 20 and 30 minutes left.
Mm-hmm.
And... Well, I mean, it's a comeback thing. Sweden came back to draw 4-4.
Oh, I didn't see that coming.
Yeah. 4 goals in 28 minutes. I don't feel I need to explain how impressive that is.
Especially against Germany.
Yeah. Now this is a Germany team who were coming into their prime as well.
Yeah. It's an impressive result. My last one before we get on to the obvious one. Liverpool against Dortmund in the Europa League last season, which was Klopp against his former team.
Yep.
Liverpool were losing 4-2 on aggregate with just under 25 minutes remaining.
Right.
And they scored 3 goals in the last 24 minutes of that match and won 5-4 on aggregate.
Right.
And they were actually going out on away goals until the very last minute when Lovren scored. So I thought that, and that was a really good game as well, so I thought that was worthy of being on our little kind of discussion.
Well, yeah. Massive comeback. All of them.
The biggest one.
Ironic, actually, because in terms of scorelines, it's actually the smallest one that we've discussed.
It is.
Yeah.
And the Liverpool Dortmund one was. But yeah, this was a... Yeah.
Close enough.
Although this was arguably the shortest time frame,
Right?
I suppose, and definitely the most important one.
Mm-hmm.
That being in Istanbul in 2005.
Yeah.
AC Milan 3-0 up at half-time against Liverpool, and then it all went wrong.
It did. And just a quick thing, that AC Milan were 3-0 up, but it could have been so much more than 3.
Oh, of course. Yeah. But it wasn't, and ultimately, Liverpool won in a shootout after the game finished 3-3.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that, until perhaps tonight, will be regarded as the greatest ever Champions League comeback.
Will tonight really be considered as great a Champions League comeback as a final?
I don't know.
That final.
I don't know, because no one's ever come back from 4 goals down before. before tonight.
In the Champions League, just to...
Yeah, just to clarify.
Yeah. That is fair, but they had 90 minutes to do that.
I also think the fact that Barca got the 6th and the decider with literally the last touch of the game makes it all that more kind of special.
It does, but again, as I reiterate, they had a full 90 minutes to do so. Whereas the Liverpool AC Milan, the comeback was made in much, much less time. Granted, they only scored 3. Barcelona scored 6.
That was a really good sentence, then. I like that.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think they'll be put in the same breath.
Well, yeah, I think that's fair.
Obviously, Liverpool ended up with a trophy at the end of it, and Barcelona just ended up in the next round. So.
Sure. I think if Barcelona win the Champions League, then that will be considered as much bigger a moment than if they don't.
I'd agree with that completely. If they go out in the next round, I'll be like, oh, that was pointless.
Again, it'd be pretty funny though.
Yeah. And I think that's all our comebacks.
Yeah.
Now, can I complete a comeback by finally winning one of our little question rounds?
I guess we'll find out.
Now, who's going first this time?
You can ask your question first.
Okay. Now, this is going to be fairly quick fire.
Right.
If you get one wrong, you fail.
Right.
No pressure.
Right.
Who are currently the 10 leading candidates in the race for the European Golden Ball?
Yeah. Okay.
Now, just for anyone who's not certain, the Golden Ball being effectively the top scorer in Europe, different leagues have different multipliers. So the French league has a 1.5 multiplier, while Syria, Premier League, La Liga, the Bundesliga have a 2 multiplier.
Mm-hmm.
So it's going to be harder for someone in League 1 to be at the top of this than it would for someone in one of the other leagues that I mentioned.
Right.
Go ahead.
Cavani.
Cavani is in there.
Yes. Well, brilliant. Messi.
Yep.
Suarez.
Yep.
Ronaldo.
Yep.
Higuain.
Yep.
Who's not scoring in England at the moment? That guy. That out.
I'm afraid not. But you didn't
Sanchez?
say your name technically. Game over.
Okay.
The ones you were missing, you didn't get Aubameyang. You didn't. Did you get Lewandowski? I don't think
How
you got
did
to
I
him.
not get Lewandowski? I didn't get to Germany.
You didn't get to Dzeko. Didn't get Kane, and didn't get Belotti.
Fair play. I doubt I would have got 10. If you'd given me 5, I'd have got 5.
Yeah, but I didn't.
Yeah, well, you're mean.
That's okay. I don't mind.
Great. So, if you get my question right, you're the new rubbish quiz at the end of our podcast champion.
What a title.
Get that trending.
I think we need a little trophy called the Rubbish Quiz at the end of our podcast trophy.
Yeah. I think we need to come up with funny names of that quiz at the end of every podcast from now on.
Yeah, a recurring gag.
Yes.
Anyway, what's your question?
Right. So, I'm really, really, really glad that this wasn't one of your comeback things.
Oh no.
I didn't expect that it would be.
Okay.
But what is the biggest comeback in terms of scoreline in Scottish football history?
Scottish?
And I will quickly say the score will get you enough for the victory. The teams will get you a prize of some sort that I haven't. If you'd have answered your question first, it would have been the automatic victory. I really should have thought about that.
You planned this really well.
Yeah.
Was it St Mirren versus Dunfermline, and was it 17 all?
You were so close.
I got one of the teams, didn't I?
No.
Oh. You got my hopes up and then just blew them up.
That. Yeah. Well, you know, when I make a mistake at the end of things, then yeah, that's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna blame it all on you.
Oh. Lovely.
But it was actually fairly recent.
Really?
Not like last year recent or anything like that, but it was in 2010.
Okay.
Motherwell versus Hibernian
Mm-hmm.
finished 6-6.
I'm pretty sure that's what I said.
I don't think it did.
Eh.
But yeah, Motherwell recovered from 6-2 down after 65 minutes to draw.
The biggest comeback in Scottish football history is only 4 goals.
Yes.
Right, fair enough. That was scary.
If I'm wrong about that, leave that in the comments. Yeah.
And on that confidence in our source note,
Wow.
I think it's time to wrap up our podcast this week.
Yep.
Thank you very much for listening. I've been Matthew David.
Yep. I've been Josh Andrews. Yeah.
You don't sound so sure.
Well, I'm not so sure you're Matthew. Michael Owen. Right. Okay.
Apparently, I've been Michael Owen. Again.
I've been Chris Kamara.
I would say why always me, but then next week I'll be Balotelli. I don't really want that.
No.
Thank you for listening. Be sure to subscribe on YouTube, like our video on YouTube if you enjoyed the podcast. Follow us on Twitter, SoundCloud, like us on Facebook. Look for us everywhere. Please don't stalk us. And hopefully we'll see you next week.
Bye.
Bye.